Hello, everyone, and welcome to your 2023 year ahead horoscope for Sagittarius rising. If you're a Sagittarius sun, of course, you can watch this video. However, it might make a little bit more sense if you watch it from your rising sign. So in this video, I'm going to be first opening up with just the major transits of this year, just the highlights to go over. Then I'm going to be talking about advice for Sagittarius risings, mindsets to have, things to keep in mind so you can have a successful year. And then I'm going to be going into the major transits of every single month of 2023. So with that being said, make sure you like this video so you can come back to it throughout the year and check on the predictions as well. Let me know in the comments below what months you're looking forward to, what months you're not looking forward to. And let me know too if you have plans or goals in mind and if they line up with the astrology of this next year. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're talking about, of course, is the major highlights of this year. I've said this, I've been saying this for months. March is the biggest month this year. We have a lot of major ingresses going on. First is Saturn is going into Pisces. This is going to be going into your fourth house. So there's going to be a lot of focus on your home and your family life. Pluto is then going to enter Aquarius also in March. This is a 20-year-long transit, so it's going to be kind of a long story, and I'm not going to be able to just go into everything about it today. However, I do have a podcast episode about it on my show, The Delineation. Make sure you check it out. It's some deep stuff. Jupiter, our ruling planet, I'm also a Sag rising, is going into Taurus in May. I think this is awesome. I think this is excellent. I think the Jupiter transits this year are really good for us. And then the North Node and the South Node later on this summer are going to be entering Aries and Libra. And this is going to be a big change to not only our friendships, but also pleasure, recreation, and things that we do for fun. And also, speaking of fun, Venus is going to be retrograde in Leo this year. This is one of the big transits this year. I love this Venus retrograde in Leo. I think it's going to be great for us. The last time this happened, it was really good for me, so I'm looking forward to it. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about advice. So what I want you guys to focus on this year is taking on more work, being a little bit more focused on your routine and your health. There's a lot of transits this year that are going to put health into a major focus for you this year. I'm sure that's already been a thing, but this time it's a little bit more focused on the health and the routine part of it. Less friends, more fun and creativity. You know, it's one of those things of you might be spending more time focusing on your own creativity and the things that you like, and you might kind of lose some friends along the way. I'll talk about that. Responsibility over home and living situation. Saturn's going into your fourth house, so there's going to be this more disciplined, mature, responsible energy going into your fourth house of home, family, living situation. So that's going to be something that you want to be focused on. And if you have plans on moving or buying a house, the astrology is kind of, pushing you towards that way too. And this is also going to be a big year about changing your beliefs about yourself. This Venus retrograde is going to be going through your ninth house of spirituality and beliefs, and Venus retrogrades are value shifts. So this is going to be a big time of kind of looking at your worldview, looking at your beliefs, and making some changes. So let's go ahead and go forward. Before I start talking about the major highlights of January, what I do want to talk about real quick is, so starting the year off, as we go into January 1st, we have Jupiter going back into Sagittarius. I didn't write this down as a highlight because this is something that kind of happens before, and I'm going to be making a video about it, so make sure you subscribe to watch that. But Jupiter dipped into Aries from May, June, July, August, September, October, and went back into Pisces in November. And when Jupiter dipped into Aries, Jupiter's your ruling planet, so whatever Jupiter's doing is a pretty big deal for you. Jupiter went to your fifth house of love, romance, sex, music, art, recreation, children. So there might have been an expansion in this area. Some of you might have had kids. Some of you might have been more focused on your, creations, your recreation, fun, pleasure. Jupiter's going to go back into Aries right at the beginning of the year. And so whatever was going on over the spring and summer, you're going to come back to, and Jupiter's going to expand that fifth house. You're going to be doing more of that stuff. And we'll be talking about that as time goes on. But really wrong button there. But really the biggest transits that we have going on in January is Mars stationing direct. This is going to be in your seventh house of relationships, others, open enemies. This is literally anybody, like whether it's your best friend or your worst enemy, as long as it's like right there in front of you. Mars has been in Gemini from August, September, October, November, December, and now we get to January, month six. And Mars finally stations direct. So there might have been, for one, Mars rules fights, conflicts. It's in Gemini, so handling two things, dealing with two different people. It's been in your seventh house of relationships, so there's been this back and forth in relationships. Mars was going forward for the first couple months, and there was this kind of pulling yourself in two different directions, focusing in two different ways. And then Mars stationed retrograde at the end of October and was retrograde from November and December and a little bit of January, where it was kind of backtracking, trying to figure out what's more important for you and where you really need to focus yourself. Mars stations direct here on this 12th. And when Mars stations direct, this is when you're going to have a better grip on like where you need to be focusing on. Especially, Mars rules your 12th house of hidden enemies, and it's in your 7th house of open enemies. So this might be a big time of kind of figuring out who's your friend, who's your foe. It's also your 5th house ruler of love, romance, sex, pleasure, and your 7th house of relationships. This is going to be moving forward with relationships after kind of going back and forth for a little while. And we have more stuff to talk about with Mars and Gemini. But once Mars stations direct, there's going to be this feeling forward movement. And one of my arguments for this year is that New Year's feeling isn't really going to hit until both Mars station direct and Mercury stations direct. Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde right before the new year. So it'll be in shadow for the end of December, and then it'll station retrograde. And this is going to be in your 2nd house of money, finances, and resources, possessions, food. So Mercury retrogrades often symbolize delays, miscommunications, rethinking, re-strategizing. And as this has been in your 2nd house of money and finances, this has just been looking over your money, going through your money a little bit more, getting things more organized. And then Mercury actually stations direct on the 18th. And in my opinion, this is when that like new year, new you feeling actually kicks into gear. Mercury stations direct in your 2nd house. The money thing gets cleared up. Whatever problems happen with money get handled by this point, and you can start to move forward again. That brings us to February. The only thing that we have going on in February, it's a very quiet month, is Mercury's going to be leaving shadow. Again, 2nd house, money, resources, things like that. But by this point, Mercury starts to actually move forward into new territory. So whatever you were dealing with from December and January, by the time we get to the beginning of February, you are moved on from and you are doing something else. The money stuff is over. But what's interesting is that February is like the quietest month, like not a lot's going on, but I've been kind of analogizing as like the calm before the storm, because when we go into March, we have a lot of things happening. One, we're going to be having this Venus-Jupiter conjunction happening in Aries. It's like the first thing that we have going on in March. Again, this is in your 5th house of sex, passion, creativity, arts, children, recreation. So this really looks fun. There's a few things I don't like about it. I mean, the thing that I really don't like about it is that it's Venus in detriment in Aries. She doesn't really like to be in Aries that much. But here's the thing. Jupiter's in your 5th house. There's a big focus on your, love life, sex life, children, dealing with art, music, creation. And Venus conjoining Jupiter's. Venus is the planet of love and romance and things like that. But she's in detriment. So there's this sense of like, Venus and Libra. Venus is very like things kind of come to her, versus Venus and Aries is very like taking things. And Venus is conjoining Jupiter. So there's this really fun, Venus and Jupiter are both the fun planets in your 5th house of fun. So it sounds pretty fun, but it's on Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. And so there's this kind of like sense of doing something that might be healing, even though it might sting a little bit. Venus does rule your 11th house of friendships, and it's in detriment in the 5th house. So this might be kind of doing things on your own, maybe not having the friends around you to support you that you thought was going to happen. Venus also rules your 6th house of health and habits, and it's in detriment in the 5th house. So maybe partying too much, doing the Jupiter thing of being excessive. But at the end of the day, it looks really fun. There's a big focus on love, romance, sex, pleasure. And then about 5 days later, Saturn enters Pisces. This is a really big deal, because for the past 2.5 years, Saturn has been in Aquarius. It's been in your 3rd house of short distance travel, communication, technology, siblings, neighbors. There's been this heavy energy in that area for you. And when Saturn enters Pisces, it's going into your 4th house of home, family, living situation, your roots, your parents. And so Saturn is asking you to take more responsibility in this area. Saturn ingressing into a new sign is like, here's this new duty, here's this new obligation, here's this new authority that you have to take on. And this is dealing with home, family, parents. It's Saturn in Pisces too. It's about being loose or being, integrating things into your life. And so Saturn going into your 4th house, maybe buying a house, maybe getting serious about where you're living long-term, maybe having to take care of a parent. There might be some stuff happening with your parents at this time, but that's going to be a thing that we deal with for the next 2.5, 3 years. So this is going to be an energy that you're going to be dealing with for a while, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So then a little bit later into the month, about 2 or 3 weeks later, Pluto enters Aquarius. And like I said, I have a whole podcast video about this. Really deep stuff, really intense, trigger warning. But Pluto's going into your 3rd house of communication, technology, short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, things like that. And Pluto rules things like power and fear and corruption and corporations and governments and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I can't just encapsulate what exactly it's going to be in just a short clip here. But over the next 20 years, Pluto is going to be really transforming your third house, the way that you use technology, the way that you integrate yourself in technology, what power that has over you and what fears you have over it versus how you let that empower yourself. For me personally, I'm a Sag rising and I do work online, and I plan on really taking myself off of main platforms and doing my own back end infrastructure so I don't have to rely on big tech platforms to operate my business. That is Pluto, me taking the power into my own hands with my technology, if you need an example. But that's pretty much what I'm doing. I've got some other stuff that's probably going to happen to me, but if you need an example, because the third house is super weird and Pluto going into it is just going to have a lot of transformational effects in this really weird area for a long time. But then after that, we get to March 25th and Mars enters Cancer. I fucking hate this there's a few people I like it for, but the Sag risings and specifically for me, I hate it. Because Mars has been in your 7th house of relationships for 8 months at this point, right? So there's all this fighting, going back and forth, this overstimulation, being distracted with relationships. And then Mars finally leaves Gemini and enters its sign of fall, where Mars is about fights and confrontation. Cancer is all about like nurturing and protecting and defending. And this is going on in your 8th house of other people's money, death, debt, taxes, the occult, secrets. So Mars in Cancer might make you feel really uncomfortable. There might be some insecure feelings that come up. Mars burns through things, and this is in your 8th house of shared resources. So, if you have to use people's resources or other people's resources, there might be this lack of there. Mars in Cancer might be this like emotional insecurity around things. Mars in Cancer is very like your actions are very motivated by your emotions, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But as Mars goes into your 8th house, there's going to be this fights or these conflicts that are happening with shared resources, emotions, the occult, secrets, debt, taxes, things like that. So even though we have a pretty brutal Mars retrograde in our 7th, then Mars goes into our 8th and it doesn't look that much better. Then we get into April, and April is really cool because April really is kind of teeing us up for the spring and the summer. There's a lot of big things happening. And the first thing we have is this Jupiter Cazimi in Aries happening on the 11th here. Again, this is all in your 5th house: sex, passion, creativity, arts, children, recreation. Jupiter's been expanding this area. But what a Cazimi is when a planet conjoins the sun or the sun conjoins a planet. And what that does is it kind of restarts that planet's energy. It kind of starts to tell a new story. It goes through a new cycle. And so this is Jupiter, your ruling planet, also the ruler of your 4th house of home and family and living situation. And it's in your 5th house of creativity, of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, all of the fun stuff, right? So there's some story that is starting again here when it comes to all of the fun, love, romance stuff here. And it's very jovial, it's very big, and all of that energy gets really refreshed around this point. Looks really good in my opinion. But what's interesting is that tees us up for what will be a week later, the solar eclipse in Aries. So at this point, the North Node is still in Taurus, the South Node is still in Scorpio, but we get our first eclipse in Aries. And this is giving us a preview into what the next year and a half of eclipses are going to bring. Again, this is all in the 5th house: sex, passion, creativity, arts, children, recreation. I think you get the picture by now. What eclipses are like emergency events that kind of take your attention away from everything and have you focus on one area of your life. So over the next year and a half, the North Node, the symbol of desire and hunger and drive, is in your 5th house of all of this creative fun stuff. And it's in Aries too. It's very like, I need to start, I need to initiate, I need to begin. And this eclipse is really taking your attention and really focusing it on this area, right? So it sounds like you have this awesome opportunity, this abundance, these gifts that are being brought to you in this area. And then there's this eclipse where it just ramps up even harder. And eclipses are like portals, right? So you're going to have a lot of energy coming through this area for the next year and a half. So now we're in the middle of eclipse season, right? And right after that, 3 days later is when we have our first Mercury retrograde of the year. Technically, we start the year with Mercury retrograde, but I'm not going to count that. And Mercury is going to station retrograde in your 6th house of work, labor, routine, health, habits, pets, coworkers, and employees. Mercury retrogrades often symbolize rethinking, redoing, replanning, going back over things. And this is happening again in your 6th house of work, health, habits. The North Node has been there for a while. So this has been an area you've been pulled into for a while at this point. But Mercury is stationing pretty much on Uranus. So this sounds like a upheaval or a random event is going to occur in this area of your schedule, habits, work, health, that is going to make you kind of rethink your plans, your schedule, and what you're doing every single day. What's important about this is Mercury is going to be retrograde in this first part of the sign of Taurus. And Jupiter is getting ready to move into Taurus. And so what I've been looking at this Mercury retrograde as is like a getting the paperwork ready for Jupiter to come in, getting, the house ready for Jupiter to make its way, to make its grand entrance into Taurus. So this is going to be a lot of planning, prepping, and changing things with your schedule, your habits, and your routines for an eventual expansion in this area. Then we move to May, and we close out eclipse season with the last lunar eclipse in Scorpio. This is happening on Cinco de Mayo. This has been in your 12th house of isolation, self-sabotage, repressed thoughts and feelings, and hidden enemies. So what's important about this eclipse is this is our last eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. The eclipses have been in Taurus and Scorpio since January of 2022. So it's been some time. But the big thing to really talk about here is I want you to think about the middle of May of 2022 and the beginning of November of 2022, because that's when those main Scorpio eclipses occurred. This is like a little tiny eclipse. Like this isn't that, the other ones were much more gnarly than this one. But the analogy I've been using for everybody is like, if you've ever moved a house before, there's the day where you move the big boxes and the big furniture. And then there's the day once that's done, you come back, you sweep the floors, you mop the floors, you clean the windows. That's what this eclipse is. The South Node is this thing that is like purging and draining and exhausting. It's been in Scorpio in your 12th house. So your fears, your phobias, your secrets, things that you are afraid of, it's been kind of coming out, and it's been you've been pretty much forced to like get rid of a lot of this stuff and empty it out. This is the last go of this. This is one last purge, one last cleanup, one last hurrah before we move on from this stuff. So this is going to require you to really purge out and get rid of stuff, especially because this is all 6th house stuff. This is in the name of health and, stability and routine. So with the South Node in Scorpio, it's like anything holding you back, any gunk that is, keeping you from moving forward, this is the time to get rid of it. So that's how we end eclipse season. And then about 2 weeks later, Jupiter enters Taurus. This is in your 6th house of work, labor, routine, health, habits, pets, coworkers, employees. Jupiter brings abundance. Jupiter brings gifts. Jupiter brings opportunities. And Jupiter is going to be entering your 6th house, where there's going to be more work, more, focus on your health, more focus on your day-to-day activities, more focus on your routines. This is Jupiter in Taurus. This is expanding value. This is expanding comfortability. This is expanding the good things. So I really like this. I'm going to talk about what I don't like about it here in just a minute. But as Jupiter enters your 6th house, this is going to be a big focus on like the grind, like what you do every day, your health, habits, work. By this point, Mercury is direct. So it's like we just had this whole rethinking of this area, and then Mercury station's direct, and all of a sudden there's all of these opportunities that are coming in this area. So that looks really good. You also might be getting pets. Then right after that, about 4 days later, on the 20th, is when we have Mars entering Leo. Now, I typically don't talk about Mars ingresses all that often, but this year the Mars ingresses seem to be followed up by major transits. And so this one's pretty important. Mars rules fights and conflicts and things like that. And it's entering your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education, publishing, social media. And Mars in Leo is like fighting very courageously, or fighting off of like, ego or pride. And what's interesting is Mars will ingress into Leo here, and you might be having problems with social media, publishing. I always like to say when Mars transits your 9th house, it's like shaking your fist at God, getting upset about things. And Mars is going to go opposite Pluto, where there's this kind of like, opposition to what you're doing, in your studies and in your travels. And there's some Pluto, figure, some powerful figure, some shadowy figure that's at odds with you on this. And Mars in Leo is also going to be squaring Jupiter. This is going to get in the way of your work. This is going to get in the way of your consistency. And there's going to be a lot of tension in this area of like your vision, your dreams versus your plans and your routines that are going to get you there. So this seems like kind of frustrating to say the least, but what's important is eventually we're going to be having a Venus retrograde here. And this Mars transit is kind of giving us all of the issues that Venus is eventually going to clean up. So Mars enters Leo, and we get to have, I'm looking forward more to Mars in Leo than Mars in Cancer in my 8th house. So then we get to June, and this is when Jupiter conjoins Rahu. This is happening on the 1st, and Rahu is sometimes better as known as the North Node, this little squiggly guy. Again, this is in your 6th house: work, labor, routine, health, habits, pets, coworkers, employees. And so the issue with this is the North Node is already this extreme hunger, this desire, or this urge to go in a specific direction in your life, for better or for worse. And this is in your 6th house of work, health, habits, routine. And so the North Node already overdoes things, right? But then you get Jupiter, and Jupiter is totally excessive. Jupiter totally does things over the top. And that is kind of like you're going to be opening up kind of a portal in this area for you where a lot of things are going to come in. So this is like, you know, on one end, I don't want to like, this is like, don't overdo like the pleasures. Don't, you know, make sure you're on top of your health. Make sure you're on top of your work. You might be taking on too much work at this time, or I don't want to say too much work, but enough to where you are overwhelmed, or you are, you know, I would just say try not to overwhelm yourself. This is definitely biting off more than you can chew. You're a Sag rising, so I'm sure you could chew it, but you get my drift. Mercury also leaves shadow at this point. So it's like this whole 6th house thing gets totally redone. And by the time we start June, it's like all of this energy is coming in your routine, your work, your health, habits, all of that stuff. It looks really good in my opinion. But then right after that, Saturn stations retrograde. This is happening again in your 4th house of home and family and living situation and parents. This happens on the 16th. Saturn, when it goes into Pisces, is going to be giving you more responsibilities, duties, obligations, authority in a specific area, that area being your home and family. But the analogy that I've been using for everybody and that I'm going to continue to use is it's kind of like getting a management position. If you work retail, you might think, oh, it'd be nice to be a manager. I'd have more control. I'd have more authority. But when you get that position, you have more responsibilities. You have more problems at the same time. And so when Saturn first dips into Aries, it's like, cool, you're the manager now. Cool, you're the boss. You have this control. But then when Saturn stations retrograde is that learning curve, that sense of having to grow into the shoes that you're wearing, of like, hey, you're taking responsibility for this. And as Saturn goes retrograde, you might be like, oh shit, I'm taking responsibility for all this. Oh fuck, what did I just sign up for? And that's not necessarily bad, but this is a maturation process, a maturing process. This is just a way of growing up. And as Saturn goes retrograde, you're going to be, you know, learning the virtues and the disciplines of what it means to be responsible in your home and with your family and things like that. So that will be a thing for the next couple of months. Saturn is retrograde for about a third of the year. Then right after that, by this point, Venus is already in Leo, but Venus enters shadow on June 19th, just a few days after. This is in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education, publishing, social media. And the thing is here is Venus is now in your 9th house. And that sounds like a lot of fun. Like Venus and Mars and Leo is going to be a lot of fun. Sure, it'll be a little bit of drama here and there. But when Venus enters shadow, this is evening star Venus, right? She's really bright in the evening sky. And this is Venus and Leo. This is getting a lot of attention. This is getting a lot of, you know, I would say stimulation, but getting a lot of attention, being in the middle of attention. And this is in the 9th house. So far distance travel, foreign countries, higher education, social media. The problem is whatever happens on this day, you're going to come back to here in a few months. And in my opinion, what this looks like is receiving some type of being witnessed in a certain way, or receiving some kind of attention that I think at this point you might realize you might not like. Evening star Venus getting ready to retrograde it's like all of this attention is coming this way, and there's something weird about it that's different, that maybe you don't like, or that you're uncomfortable with, or maybe it challenges your beliefs. Venus also rules your 11th house of friendships and your 6th house of work, and it's going into shadow in your 9th house. So I think your friends regarding, you know, your beliefs regarding higher education, regarding social media are going to change, as well as the 9th house is education, and it's your 6th house ruler of work. So maybe, you know, taking a course or learning things for your work, doing different things for your work. There's going to be something that happens on this day that we come back to, and so we'll get to that. We get to July, and Mars enters Virgo. So again, the Mars ingresses are typically for me never as important, but this year we're going to be having a Mercury retrograde in Virgo. So what that sounds like to me is Mars is going to cause some issues and Mercury is going to come through later on and clean them up. Mars rules fights, conflicts, you know, heating, separating, cutting, things like that. But it's going to be in your 10th house of your career, your legacy, and your reputation. So this might be making too many tiny adjustments, too tweaks, being a little bit too anal about a few things to where it just makes things worse. Like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just doing a little bit too much and getting too into the details to where you kind of lose the bigger picture here. So this is going to be causing some issues in your workplace, your career, things like that. But right after that, about 2 weeks later, on the 18th, the North Node and the South Node will be entering Aries in Libra. And this is really where things shift for you guys, because the North Node is going into your 5th house. Again, we've talked about this. Sex, passion, creativity, arts, children, you get it. This is when that shift occurs where you're really focused on the creative side. You're really pulled in and drawn towards being expressive, being creative, procreating, all of that fun stuff, right? But at the cost of your 11th house. The South Node, which represents this drain or this exhaustion or something to get rid of, is going into your 11th house of community, networks, friends. And sometimes it rules career. If you're like me, my midheaven's in Libra. So this is going to be affecting things in my career. And so this is where things shift, and you probably are going to be hanging out less with people and spending less time with networks and friends and communities and really focusing on your own creative, your own fun, your own recreational pursuits, or even kids. But then after that, once we get to that, let's actually pull this up on the chart real quick. Once we get to the 18th and the node shift signs, right? Then we get to July 22nd, which just so happens to be my birthday. And Venus stations retrograde in Leo. Again, this is in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel, higher education. What's important to remember, though, is Venus stations retrograde in the same sign every 8 years. So I want you to think about what was going on in the summer of 2015 for you. Because whatever was going on that summer, you're going to kind of come back to, and there's going to be some weird cycle repeating in your life, something that was going on in summer of 2015. Venus is your 11th house of friendships, community, networks. It's also your 6th house of work, health, routines. And this is that moment where, again, maybe Venus in Leo was receiving this attention and something was weird. This is when that value change occurs. And this is about your beliefs, right? The 9th house is like beliefs, worldview, astrology, spirituality, publishing. And this has to do with 6th house stuff. So again, work, health, routine, and 11th house of friends. Notice that the South Node is in Libra. So this honestly seems like a big change in friendships regarding your beliefs or regarding higher education or regarding foreign people. But as Venus goes retrograde, this is where that value shift really occurs, and you really begin to change something, or you begin to change something that you value. And for me personally, since Venus rules my 6th house of health, I typically make really big health changes or habit changes when Venus goes retrograde. So then once Venus goes retrograde, we get into August. And in August, this is like 3 weeks later, so we're pretty deep into the Venus retrograde. That's when we have the Venus Cazimi in Leo. That's happening on the 13th. Again, same house, same topics, but it's a Cazimi. So this is that middle point of the Venus retrograde. And the way I like to talk about this is that clarity moment where when you first start something, there's this excitement about starting it and it's very new. This is where you realize the results. Venus conjoining the sun is resetting Venus's energy. It's the middle of the retrograde. And I think this is where it's like, for example, since Venus rules your 6th house of health and habits, maybe you quit something or start a new routine. And when Venus goes retrograde at first, it's like getting used to it, getting in the jive. But then this Venus Cazimi moment is like the moment where you realize that your values actually have shifted, that you've changed your mindset about something, you've changed your beliefs about something. And also, too, this is your 11th house of friends that we're talking about. But this is where things really kind of get expunged and really start over in terms of the belief part of it. So this is really, I mean, again, what's interesting though, and I'm going to be talking about this in a minute, is Venus is going to be squaring Uranus and Jupiter this whole time. So doing radical, new, innovative things with your health, with your schedule, with your routines regarding 9th house things of social media, publishing, traveling, things like that. This is really where that shift occurs, or at least you are now really deep into that shift to where you can now realize that there are some results that you're getting from taking on this change. So then right after that, we get to the 24th, about a week and a half later, and Mercury stations retrograde in Virgo. Again, this is in your 10th house of career, reputation, and this is where I was talking about a minute ago that, Mars is going to be here in your 10th house, maybe causing some issues, and then it's not going to be until Mercury retrogrades where it's like, oh, okay, maybe you miscommunicated something. Maybe you put something out there that didn't work well. Mercury retrograde in your 10th house, maybe quitting your job, maybe changing jobs, maybe doing something different. But this is where you're going to be rethinking, re-strategizing, and going over your career, your working life. Mercury also rules your 7th house of relationships, and this is a Mercury retrograde in your 10th house, and the 10th house sometimes deals with relationships, and Venus is in the middle of a retrograde, so this could be a big relationship change. This could just be a big change in how the world sees you. So Mercury goes retrograde, and there's some type of change or delay or miscommunication that's going on in your working life, in your career. But then Mars enters Libra 4 days later. This is important because now the South Node is in Libra, and this is another Mars ingress that is kind of building up momentum for things to come later. So Mars enters Libra into your 11th house of community, networks, friends, and again, sometimes career. Mars rules fights and conflicts, and it's in detriment in Libra. Libra is all about balance and fairness, and Aries is all about like war, right? So Mars can't do its war-like thing in Libra. It has to be more fair and peaceful and balanced. But this is going in your 11th house of friends and community. So there's going to be this, being at odds with them. Mars and Libra might be like doing more things for friends and not doing things for yourself when you really should be doing things for yourself. Mars and Libra is being, passive aggressive, non-confrontational, being frustrated, being indecisive are big things with Mars and Libra. And as that goes into your 11th house of friends, it's going to be bringing up all this friend stuff. But again, we're going to be talking about that as things go on. Oops, wrong button. Then we get to September. And by the time we start September, Venus is direct. This is happening on September 4th. This is where Venus becomes morning star and begins to move forward. An evening star Venus before the retrograde is like a bunch of things are coming to Venus in Leo in evening star. And it's all this attention. It's like maybe not the attention that you want. But then Venus goes direct as morning star, where Venus and Leo is like, I want attention, and I'm going to go get that attention. I'm going to go find that attention. I'm going to go find that, the ability to be, witnessed, to be seen, to be glorified. And so there's some type of value change that occurred. And by the time Venus stations direct, it's like, now you're on your way doing something different. Again, 11th house of friends, 6th house of health and day-to-day activities, moving forward in Leo, in your 9th house, traveling, exploring, doing something new, something that's very passionate, something that's very fun. But what's interesting is on the same day, Jupiter stations retrograde. And like I said a minute ago, Venus is going to be squaring Jupiter this whole time. And so we get to the 4th here, and if you look here, Venus is direct, so it's like, all right, our values have shifted. We're moving this way, but Jupiter goes retrograde. And this is the point where, Jupiter has been bringing up all of this hope and abundance and faith in your 6th house of work, health, routines. But as Jupiter goes retrograde, there's this sense of like going without that faith, going without that hope, having to internalize it and having to create gratitude within in order to keep that, energy sustainable. But Jupiter going retrograde is going to make you rethink your schedule, your habits, your work. Jupiter going retrograde is like, what do you believe about this? Jupiter might be like a lot of hope when it's moving forward, but when it goes retrograde, that hope kind of dissipates, and you kind of have to create philosophies or subscribe to a philosophy to kind of get you by and, learn more and create wisdom around this area, right? This is like when Jupiter's direct, it's super easy. When Jupiter's retrograde, it's like, hey, you got to still remain grateful. You still got to remain hopeful. You still have to have faith in this work area of your life. And what's interesting is this happens right as Venus stations direct. So it's like all of a sudden you're moving forward with something, and then all of a sudden, once you're moving forward with that, you're going to be changing your beliefs around it again. You're going to be rethinking that area of your life again. So then we get to the 16th here, again, about 2 weeks, Mercury stations direct in Virgo. So this is the time where your work gets cleared up, any miscommunications, delays, problems, that all gets worked out, and you finally get to move forward again. Maybe you, are changing your brand, changing whatever. Everything about that starts to get cleared up around this time, and you can begin to move forward in both relationships and career stuff. But that brings us to October. And in October, the first transit that we have on the 4th here is Mars conjoining the South Node. This is pretty brutal. It's still in your 11th house of friends and community. The South Node is there where there's this purge, there's this drain, it's exhausting. And Mars separates, Mars cuts. And this is happening again in your 11th house of friends on the South Node. It kind of sounds like you need to get rid of some friends. It kind of sounds like you need to move on from somebody. Mars rules your 12th house of hidden enemies and fears and phobias. And as it conjoins the South Node in Libra, this is kind of just purging stuff out. It's not going to look pretty. Like Mars in Libra is like wanting to be diplomatic about it, but it may not turn out that way. The worst thing is that don't be indecisive. Don't go back and forth on this. Like Mars in Libra in the South Node is probably going to be losing some friends, probably moving on from a group of people, and just move on from it. It's for the best, to be honest with you. But it also could be a hidden enemy making themselves revealed, right? Mars does rule the 12th house here. And that's important because that's setting us up for the eclipse that we're about to have here. So keep that in mind. Right after that, a week later, essentially, Mars enters Scorpio. And that's where it enters your 12th house of isolation, self-sabotage, repressed thoughts and feelings, hidden enemies. Mars is going to be ruling your 12th house, so it's going to go into its home sign. But this is where the mania kicks in, so to say. Like, I always like to joke around with people because I'm a Sag rising and Scorpio rules my 12th house. And Scorpio is like the darkest like sign in the 12th house is like your nightmares. And back here, it's a little wild and crazy, but Mars is going to be going into there and activating all of the fear, repressed parts of yourself, self-sabotage. The difference is the South Node has just gone through this area. So you've already done a big purge and a dumping and a releasing of fears, phobias, self-sabotage stuff. But as Mars goes back in there for the first time without the South Node, this is going to be bringing up all of those topics again. So, it's the same shit, different day. Life is a cycle. Time is not linear. This time, though, you're just going to be in an elevated way. So it's not like you're just dealing with the same nightmares and dealing with the same like fears and phobias. You've gotten over a lot of the old ones, but now you're coming back to this part in your life where those problems are going to manifest themselves again. You might be isolating more. You might be more by yourself. Mars rules your 5th house of creativity, and it's in the 12th house of isolation. This is a great time to lock yourself in your studio and make your art, right? So then right after that, literally 2 days after that, we have our first solar eclipse in Libra. So again, Mars goes into your 12th house of hidden enemies, and then we have this solar eclipse in your 11th house of friends. And it's on the South Node where this is kind of like looking at peace and balance with friendships. But it's on the South Node where it's like, hey, this isn't balanced, right? This isn't fair. And there needs to be something that you have to get rid of, that you have to purge out. And at this point too, Venus, the ruler of your 11th house, now is out of shadow, is now in Virgo in her sign of fall, opposite Saturn. So this is going to be a little brutal time with friendships and community. And in my opinion, this just looks like a time of getting rid of stuff that doesn't serve you, not worrying about it, and just kind of letting things be let go and not holding on to anything. Mars will be in Scorpio too, so you'll be a little bit in revenge mode, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. Then we get to November. Saturn stations direct in Pisces. This is on November 4th. Now, the thing is with this is, like I said before, Saturn being retrograde is like learning the discipline, learning the, responsibility over your home life, your family life, your living situation. Once Saturn stations direct, it's like you have had that maturing process, and now you can be a better authority or be more responsible with this stuff. Like when Saturn first goes in, it's like getting all this responsibility. Saturn goes retrograde where you go, oh, like it's, it's kind of hard to step into that. And Saturn retrograde is learning the discipline, just applying what you know. And then Saturn stationing direct is like, okay, I've grown up here, and now I know how to look at this with a much more mature mindset. Saturn rules over your 2nd house of money and your 3rd house, again, of communication, technology, siblings, neighbors. So somehow those two factors are going to get involved. It's not that mind-blowing to think that somehow money is going to be involved with your 4th house of home and living situation, but I think you guys are getting what I'm saying. Then we get to the 17th, and we have a Mars Cazimi in Scorpio. So this is still in your 12th house. We're still talking about the 12th house stuff, but something I want to bring up is this is also going to bring up health stuff. Because as we go into this, Mars, we're still on November 4th here. Mars, during this time, is going to make an opposition to Jupiter, and it's going to make an opposition to Uranus. So there's going to be something, you might regress, you might go backwards a little bit, and it might kind of throw off your health game, your work, your routine, and that's whatever, right? That will be kind of a problem. But Mars, and Mars's cycle around the sun, is often analogized as the hero's journey. This time I'm kind of coining this as the villain origin story. Typically when Mars conjoins the sun, this is starting the hero's journey off again. But this seems much more of like the story is more anchored in anger or in frustration or in paranoia. And this is Mars going Kazemi in the 12th house. This is maybe real, like, again, this also might be like problems with creativity, problems with kids, problems with love, romance, and sex. It's in your 12th house of, hospitals, isolation, alienation, and this is kind of resetting things. It's also the sun, so we're talking about your beliefs, and I think you might just get agitated and really hard on yourself at this time. And I think this is a time to really like reset that any anger or frustrations that you have. This is a good time to use them as fueling as motivators for anything productive, essentially. But this is really where you kind of recluse and things kind of start anew in the back of your head in terms of fears, phobias, people, hidden enemies, things like that. And then right after that, just a few days later, Mars enters Sagittarius. This isn't the biggest thing in the world, but again, each Mars ingress has something up with it. But Mars will be entering your first house of the self, body, image. Mars is energy. It's going to be going in your first house of the body. You're going to be very, very energized, very, very expressive, very go energy. It's Mars and Sag, right? Like, let's just go. Let's just explore. The problem is Mars is going to square Saturn. So there's something that you really want to be ambitious and go for that's going to get in the way of this living situation thing that you've got going on, or the commitments that you have made to your family, to your living situation. Also, all this exploration and fun might cost some money. It's going to be squaring your second and your third ruler. It might even cost some time. So it's like you're going to feel very excited and ambitious, but it's not going to be as easy as just jumping the gun and going. You have more responsibilities and commitments to take care of now. So then we get to December. We start wrapping up the year, and we have another Mercury retrograde in Capricorn. Again, this is in your second house of money and finances, so rethinking, re-strategizing, replanning. But what's funny is Mercury stations retrograde at the exact same degree that it's stationed direct at earlier in the year. So whatever happens in January and in February, you're going to be coming back to here around December 13th, around money and finances and resources. It's literally going to be the same thing over again. So really pay attention to this Mercury retrograde that we have in January of 2023, because you're going to come back to that here in December. And again, Mercury rules your 10th house of career and relationships. So somehow career and relationships are going to get involved with money. And then we get to the end of the year. I mean, we literally get almost before the new year, and Jupiter stations direct. Again, it's still in your 6th house of work, routine, health. But once Jupiter stations direct, this is like hope and faith being restored. Jupiter retrograde is like having to create that hope and that faith within, having to see the bigger picture, even though the outside circumstances may not necessarily line up with it. But when Jupiter stations direct, I mean, this will be really like, I think, a good feeling as far as like new year, new you, any goals, plans, that you weren't able to get done in 2023. I think this is going to be a great time to really kickstart that and go off. And this is expanding your work, expanding health, expanding routine. So it seems pretty good as far as the money and the work stuff. But that's how we end 2023, and that's what I got for you guys. So if you like this video, make sure you give it a like. Let me know what your thoughts about this, what your thoughts are about this in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be having videos about Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Aries, and Jupiter in Taurus, and so you don't want to miss that. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next time.